Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 31st of August 2019, and it's a pleasure to be able to work with Kevin Moore and the Moore Show on his continued crusade to expose the greater reality and educate everybody who visits his YouTube site for the Moore Show and Moore Talk. And I give thanks again to Kevin for all the work he's doing, along with promoting my work as well in this particular methodology. Okay, so let's have a look at today's agenda. We've got the 15-minute talk by myself on the dawn of the Backfill people, which I'm starting to feel is an extremely relevant topic right now, and people who are spiritual will understand this, specifically those who are seeing the drop in frequencies around us and how people are responding. And then we've got a series of questions from two individuals this time, one from Japan and one from almost in the same direction but the opposite side of the world, from Hawaii. So thank you to JM and OM for their questions, and we'll go through those one by one. And then the end of meet meditation is basically to create and keep a pure mind and pure thoughts, which is again very important in this particular time period when everything that's happening around us is particularly, shall I say, karmic or low frequency. And this is something we need to be aware of as well, that being pulled into low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions is in fact augmenting our shall we say, our stiction to the low frequencies, and decreases our ability to move away from it. So just think about those things when you're listening to what's going on with the Backfill people. So the dawn of the Backfill people. Some of you may have seen a number of years ago a lecture I gave with Dolores Cannon at one of the transformation conferences, where Dolores and myself and Julia Cannon, we were sitting down with the audience of the transformation conference, and we're going through a series of questions and answers. And one of the things I'd noticed in one of the books I was working on was there was an intermediate genre of soul being allowed to incarnate in the human form, the incarnate human body, to backfill for those souls who, whilst they're incarnate, had managed to raise their frequencies to a higher level and therefore move into the fourth frequency level, therefore out of the visual range and perceptual and sensory range of most of the individuals who are still within the third frequency level. If you remember that ideal in frequency is not dimensions, because dimension is a metric that scientists have used and mankind has used to try and describe basically volume, which is height, width and breadth. Okay, and they call that three dimensions. Then they call the fourth dimension time, which doesn't exist. So how can you have a fourth dimension that doesn't exist? But we live basically we exist in a frequential state, which is the basic building blocks of the multiverse. Okay, so when these individuals who've ascended the frequencies move on, they move into the next frequency level, which is, for all intents and purposes, is invisible to us, because and we can't even touch it. It's not tactile because it's such a higher frequency, and so we can't see, sense, or communicate with those who have gone to a higher frequency. Although they can see us, and they can lower their frequencies temporarily. And it is only very temporarily, to be able to communicate with us or interact with us when they need to. Now, because of the, shall we say, the number of individuals who are gradually and increasingly moving up the frequencies, and therefore sort of moving out of the frequencies that we're in now, and they go into the higher frequencies, the overall population of the Earth starts to decrease. And if people suddenly started to disappear, which is what happens, people just disappear literally, then all of these different individuals were disappearing en masse and in a large way, there would be a lot of concern all over the world as to what's happening. We're being abducted by aliens or other incarnate entities, or is there simply a shift in reality? Well, there is a shift in reality, specifically for those who are moving up the frequencies. But in terms of the rest of those individuals who stay here, or who elect to stay here to help those who are still here to move up the frequencies, there is obviously a loss of population. And that population is being allowed to be filled by a genre of soul, which is in between the animal soul and the human soul. So, and they haven't been allowed to incarnate and have individualized free will before. They've only ever had, shall I say, some level of collective will or hive type of mentality, so to speak, or hive consciousness. So they've always been working autonomously, but in a collective. Okay, and even in the case that for ourselves, when we incarnate into different incarnate vehicles, we sometimes go into a vehicle. In fact, we do it quite regularly, actually, where although we have free will, we have a free will that is still linked up to the needs of the collective. So we don't have individualized free will like we've got here on Earth, where we can be totally selfish, down to the fact that we can be selfish about our own needs and desires to the detriment of others. This doesn't happen in these other levels. But the Backfill people, being a different genre of sentience, or should we say evolutionary level, but sentience is the better way of saying it. It's different sentient weight. They don't have the same evolutionary content that we do normally. So in effect, what happens there is that they get pulled in. They're getting pulled into karmic thoughts, behaviours, and actions, low frequency thoughts, behaviours, and actions, quite quickly. And so you can see what's going on around the planet. You know, there's things like different, shall we say, different ways to abuse the body that's being considered as being acceptable, such as taking drugs, such as various different art forms associated with the body. Some of them are temporary, some of them are permanent, and also the way in which they interact with others as well. Now, this doesn't mean that Backfill people are not going to be successful financially. They can be very successful financially and in business and in education. But in terms of their ability to think outside of the box in terms of being of service to others, this doesn't come into their minds at all. They end up being very selfish and very self-centered. But for most of them, although there are individuals who can be very successful from an educational perspective, most of them tend to be mediocre at best, and most of them tend to be wanting instant gratification. They want things now. They're not prepared to save up for them. They're not prepared to wait. They're not prepared to work for things. They just want everything now, and they're the sort of individual who, if you met them on the beach, they would be playing loud music, and they'd probably leave bottles of beer, empty bottles of beer around for somebody else to clear up. So they're not even considering the impact of how they interact with their own environment, let alone with other individuals as well. And so what's going on now is we've seen a lot of these genres of souls incarnating on Earth, because a lot of individuals, not only have they got to the point where they have, for want of a better word, being able to move up the frequencies whilst incarnate, a lot of aspects or souls have got to the point where they don't need to incarnate to continue their accelerated level of evolution progression. They can evolve at a reasonable rate, an acceptable rate, without being incarnate on the Earth, or incarnate at all. And so the population that's required to maintain equilibrium, so to speak, can't be satisfied by those individuals who are progressing from an evolutionary perspective. Now, this seems a bit bizarre when you think that there are quite a number of different texts that suggest that there is evidence, and I've picked it up as well, that a lot of souls want to incarnate in the human form. And there's a massive queue for it, like a huge waiting list. But most of this is being filled up by those entities who are backfilling. You know, they also benefit from having individualized free will and being on the Earth, which is known to be an evolutionary accelerant, and is known to be, for want of a better word, the biggest example of how we may accelerate the overall evolution of every entity, every soul that can incarnate using the physical universe, the gross physical universe, as a medium to do so. And so, at some point, the Earth being the class act, so to speak, in terms of evolutionary progression, although it does attract a lot of karma, we can be attracted to karmic thoughts, behaviours and actions, that's low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, quite quickly. we can also break out of it if we work hard on ourselves. And so it'll be seen as the template for how individualized free will can work, and can, if managed properly, allow incarnate aspects to experience, learn and evolve in a more accelerated way than they would do if they were part of a collective incarnate condition. And so every sentient entity or even being that is being allowed to incarnate will experience this progression, and there is no reason why those souls that are in between the animal soul and those that are in between and the human soul can't also benefit. It's just that they very quickly get attracted to and addicted to sensory stimulus, food stimulus, status, material wealth, and shall we say, the ability to control others as well. And so this is why we're seeing lots and lots and lots of individuals now who are, not paying attention to the law, thinking they're above the law, thinking they're above any form of authority, doing their own thing, not paying attention to anything that's going around them. They drive without consideration on the roads, they speed on the roads, they take what they need to from supermarkets without paying, they coalesce together with likewise individuals. They're not prepared to take time to do things, so they buy ready-made meals which have got all of these different preservatives in there, which is very difficult for the body, or almost impossible for the body to assimilate and to metabolize, and so it stays there. That's why they're all getting very, very fat as well. So we've seen all of the evidence that the number of backfill people on the earth are on the increase, and those individuals who are still working on ascending the frequencies whilst they're incarnate are starting to notice it, because not only are they seeing bizarre things happen around them in terms of the governance of various different countries, but also seeing bizarre things that are happening in terms of how individuals are interacting with them, whether they take care about how they interact with people, whether they want to be of service or not, or whether they just want to be, totally and utterly thinking of their own stuff rather than somebody else's, rather than what somebody else might think or do. They're totally selfish, and so people who are spiritual are having a lot of problems right now, because the overall aspect of the frequencies associated with the earth, when all these backfill people are coming into incarnation, is being reduced as a result. The more backfill people that are incarnating, and the more that they potentially have the potential to be addicted to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, the more is the potential for the overall frequency state of the earth to drop down as well. And so we're all finding it difficult as a result of this. So we need to find a way of working around the backfill people and still maintaining our own sort of frequential status. And the thing to do is to coalesce or be around individuals who are good company, who are in essence also spiritual, who are like-minded. Birds of a feather flock together. As backfill people who are naturally angry people because they're low frequency, club together. They talk about conspiracy theories. They complain about this, that, and the other. They think that the world owes them a living, for instance, and a state of life, so to speak. Those around us can also coalesce with more spiritual individuals who are thinking in higher thoughts. And when you see a spiritual person who's dropping down the frequencies, try to coach them a little bit. Don't get too mad, because they'll be very attracted to low frequencies, even though they don't even know it. It's a bit like slowly falling asleep in your armchair watching television. You don't know you're falling asleep until you've woke up later, and then you wonder what happened and what's happened to all that time. This is the same thing with dropping down the frequencies. Excuse me. It's so very easy to drop down the frequencies, but it's very hard to regain or stop that downward slide and come back up the frequencies. So help people where you can do, but in a very careful way, because they'll be more attracted to lower frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, thinking it's okay to do so, than it is to stop themselves and to start thinking and behaving and acting in a high frequency way. And one of the things you'll notice first is people get angrier first, and people start to use the wrong language, and also things like drop litter or throw tantrums. These are the things that happen around you. They can happen to your loved ones, they can happen to your friends and neighbours, people who you didn't expect. And so the backfill people, although maybe 5 years ago was a concept that was coming in, it's now becoming obvious as these backfill people becoming more mature. When I was talking about this, maybe that there wasn't so many backfill people who were who could be classified as backfill people, but now that they are getting older and therefore becoming more independent and therefore becoming more influenced by other like-minded people or like energy people, like frequential people, it's quite obvious that there was many more in the world than any of us anticipated. Okay, so be vigilant, be aware of what's going on around you. Don't worry about what's going on around you. Stay with like-minded people. Keep good company. Help those who are struggling, but don't force them, because they will reject what you're. Even if they're very spiritual people, they will reject what you're doing because they will be more in tune with lower frequencies, albeit subliminally and not understanding it, than they would be with the higher frequencies. Remember, it's easier to drop down the frequencies than it is to climb up the frequencies. It's easier to want material wealth and status than it is to live with just enough. As Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And that is so very, very true. So just be aware and awake of what's going on around you, and notice that even individuals in governments, in predominant positions, can also be backfill people. And just look at the way they're behaving, and you're behaving and acting and dealing with others around them without care of what they're doing downstream, and you'll find out that that's a backfill person. Okay, let's have a look at the questions. No doubt that particular lecture is going to cause a stir, and I have no apologies for that, actually. Look around you, everybody. See what's going on. Avoid what's going on. Avoid the downward slide. Stop yourself, check yourself daily as to how you're thinking, behaving and acting, and take the higher road, not the lower road. Okay, so we've got a series of questions from JM first. Okay, and the first question here is, in the History of God, chapter 15, mediums who can tell the future. And the question is for me, can I tell the future? Do you know any mediums who can tell the future? There is no such thing as future or past or present. There is only now. Except that when we incarnate, we see things in a linear perspective rather than a spherical perspective. If you think about event space, exists, all different events exist in the same space concurrently, and every event is in contact either directly or indirectly with each other, then you can see that in essence there is no such thing as past, present or future. It is only now. But with our lower frequencies, we can only experience the now in a linear way rather than the now in a holistic way. So there are a number of mediums who I know who've been able to see certain levels of, shall we say, nowness that we would classify as being futureness, so to speak. And there's one particular individual in the College of Psychic Studies who I think is very good, who's been able to. In fact, there was one other as well, who was very good. Although the clarity of detail wasn't specifically good, because that's the level of connectivity. In essence, what was being said was accurate only when that event came into focus. Then I saw that the things that were predicted by this individual were quite accurate. It's just that the level of accuracy, when you're seeing it in the pre-event stage, so to speak, can be quite nebulous. It becomes accurate when you see it in the post-event stage, if you want to think of that. So can I tell the future? I get bits of it. I am not allowed to see my own future. I've seen bits in totality. I've seen little bits of it. So when I get to that point, I think, yes, I remember that. This is what I'm supposed to be doing now. This is what I'm supposed to experience now. But in general, I'm like everybody else. I'm having to experience things now. If we knew too much of a potential future, and that potential future didn't come, then we would be in confusion. Because don't forget, we're not only are we moving from one event space to another event space, there's lots of different potential event spaces as well, and potentials or potential of different potentials, or the possibility of different possibilities of potentials. So to know a particular event space, which can be classified as a future event space, isn't particularly helpful, because things can happen that sort of upstream of that, which can change us, which can change our direction or our events, or the event stream that goes within event spaces, or goes from one event space to another, and so we can move away from the particular event stream that was exhibiting itself as being the mainstream at that particular point in our existence, and so we can move from one to another. So knowing the future is only a prediction based upon circumstances that appear to be correct at this point in our existence, and may not be what we're going to experience later, and of course based upon our decision points. Good question, thanks for that. Question 2. In the history of God, the Source Entity explains to you how after the disaster that the Atlanteans caused, the Egyptians were introduced to the land in an up and running state, with everything from houses to shops to agriculture to industry already working and ready to go. With all their spherical memories completely erased, how did they know how to operate shops, farms and industry? And who designed the farms? Who created the shops and set up the industry? Did this include currency, language and countless other things that distinguish societies from each other? Yeah, I mean, basically the entities that work with us, that control the opportunity for incarnating on the earth, effectively created the environment in its totality. And there's a number of entities, or should we say aspects, who incarnated directly into a fully formed body with a certain memory set that allowed them to be functional. And those were quite brave souls, because they literally went into an incarnation at a midpoint, so to speak, and others went in the points slightly before. If you look at some of the artwork the Egyptians have got, you don't see many of them showing old people, do you? Specifically the earlier ones. You don't see many people. You don't see many old people. You see people who appear to have large stomachs, who could be pregnant, and you may see the odd child, but you don't see many old. You don't see any old people. I've not seen any old people in there. Even the Minoans. You never see any pictures of old people. It's always individuals who are fully mature. And so basically at one point there was an objective there to show individuals how to be. And so a lot of the hieroglyphs, for instance, are it's like manuals on how to be. The incarnate aspects knew how to read these hieroglyphs, so they knew how to be, and they also knew how to operate, because they had the programming there. It was only when they started to have babies, for instance, and reproduce, that those babies were then educated by those aspects that had incarnated into a fully formed, mature body, with all of the information already sort of part of their sentience that allowed them to sort of hit the ground running. So everything was created, basically. It was created by, again, those entities that look after the earth and monitor the earth, including the guides and helpers associated with those individuals who incarnated. A lot of work went on, a hell of a lot of work. If you think about, I mean, the population of the earth was significantly lower than it is now. I mean, it wasn't even 1%, it wasn't even that. So it was much easier to do in comparison to what it would be to do to the same level now. Okay, question 3, and a related question is: are there industries running today that are directly descended from an introduced industry rather than being developed by humans? I've got to have a quick question about that. I'm being told there's two things. One is the use of silicates, like crystals for instance, to affect healing, and that could be used in various different technologies. And the second one is the knowledge of homeopathy and herbs as to how they could be used to heal the body. So if you want to call those industries, you can do. I'd call them knowledge bases. But they were introduced as being part of the up and running system, so to speak, rather than being developed over a period of different event spaces. Okay. Fourth question. In the history of God, when discussing the Egyptian power generators, the source entity states that they were used for communication purposes. Individuals who were trained correctly could use the energies collected by the structures to communicate with others of the human race that were transported to other parts of the universe. Are there humans alive today who are in active touch with other human beings located elsewhere in the universe, or has this ability been lost forever? And that's another good question. Let me just meditate on that a moment. Well, the interesting thing is that I was told that the Illuminati, certain sections or fractions of the Illuminati do. I was also told that the Illuminati aren't particularly one group of individuals. There is a number of different groups, different sections of individuals, and they don't always work together. And some of these do have the ability to, and do, with various different levels of technology, communicate with other, shall we say, human incarnates that are descended from those who left the earth in other particular civilizations, incarnate civilizations based upon the human form, and they communicate with them to introduce certain technologies or certain ideas, or for governance purposes. And that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Governance purposes. So that lets you know that there are certain individuals within so-called hidden societies that are governing us in a subliminal manner, or a shall we say, a covert manner. But they also communicate with some of those aspects that did move away from the earth tens of thousands of years ago. Must even more, that like about 25 to 50,000 years ago. Okay, so the ability has not been lost forever, but we can meditate on and can create our own ability to communicate with these different entities. All we need to do is to spend plenty of time doing the work, meditating, doing the traversing of frequencies work. Things like Kriya Yoga, for instance. All of these things you've done dedicated in a dedicated fashion can be used to allow us to communicate with other entities who are disincarnate or incarnate in different parts and different frequencies of the universe. Okay, the next question, question 5. The source entity tells us that there are approximately 415,000 races of beings that have free will, singularly or collectively. How many on or in the Earth? How many in our solar system? Well, the Earth. When the source entity said that, he said that the level of free will, the singular free will, it's also aligned to collectivity, or the hive-based condition of working together. So individualized free will, in this instance, is not in relative to what the source said about the 415,000 races, is not specifically aligned to individualized free will, where the individual is totally able to do whatever they want to, irrespective of how it affects another. This doesn't happen in the rest of the physical universe. It only happens here. So, on the Earth, there's only really the human race that has individualized free will, and there's another race that are a higher frequency that exist within some part of the Earth structure as well, and also the dolphins, the souls that are incarnating in the dolphin form. They have individualized free will, but also on a collective basis. So the two other civilizations or entities, incarnate entities, one of a higher frequency, one in the dolphin form, do have individualized free will, but they are still linked into the need to work in a collective fashion. So even though they've got individualized free will, that individualized free will, if it was used to a detrimental effect with any other individual or multiple function of the collective, they wouldn't be allowed to do so because there's a natural sort of inhibitor there. Okay, think of it. I've just been told to think of it in terms of the Asimov's 3 robot laws. Okay, think of it in terms of those as to how an individualised with free will that works with a collective is allowed to work. And I've just been told that where do you think Asimov got those laws from? He was given them based upon how most incarnate aspects who have individualised free will but are part of a collective operate. Okay, that's an interesting comment. I didn't appreciate that. Next question. From the history of God again, where do you think the ideas for what you call science fiction come from, but from the greater reality? This raises all sorts of delicious lines of questioning. I'm thinking of Star Wars and Avatar, which I assume you've seen, which I have, yes. And I thought Avatar was very good, and it was quite an interesting way of considering. It's an interesting way of illustrating how potentially one soul enters a different body. Or should I say, how potentially the primary incarnation of a soul can then go into a secondary incarnation. Some of you have heard the lectures based upon primary and secondary incarnations. This isn't anything to do with sub-incarnations, by the way, which are basically what shards are, that where a level of sentience from the aspect is separated out or isolated and goes into a different body as well. This is in effect the primary incarnation being in one body, and then the sentience or the vast majority of the sentience then being projected into another body. So I think Avatar is a very good concept of that. I think Star Wars was also a very good way of explaining and educating us that there are very many different form factors that we are incarnate into. You know, George Lucas and others, Steven Spielberg, J.J. Abrams, and all those different people, they're not doing this work for nothing. It's all part of the education process of making different body types acceptable to us. The human race, in its collective sense, is very. It doesn't accept change very well. I mean, you look at how the white Caucasian hasn't really accepted Afro-Caribbean or Asian or the Chinese Asians or the Indian Asians, or the American Indians. There's a lot of issues surrounding the different body types that are minor variations upon the human form that we see on Earth, and the discrimination is appalling. You imagine what the discrimination is going to be like when we've got the different form factors that we see on Star Trek or Star Wars or any other science fiction films we've seen. It's all part of the education process. So at one point we'll start to accept that this is just a different body type, and that the sentience is the same. Or maybe it's a slightly different genre of sentience, but basically we're all souls. When we understand that we're all souls, and we're using a body to experience, learn, and evolve in a low frequency environment, then we will progress at a much faster evolutionary rate. Let's look for the rest of this question. Is there anywhere where the Star Wars concept of the Force as something one can tap into and manipulate for good or evil actually exists? Is there anywhere where the act of temporarily physically bonding with animals through a bodily appendage to control them works? Thinking that the feature of Pandora and Avatar. Thank you for processing inquiries like this. Well, basically, we used to, and still can if we work hard, link into any animal on Earth or any animal in the rest of the physical universe and experience coagination with them, which is something that Julian May, it's a lovely word, I love it. Coagination is a word that Julian May, who did the Many Coloured Land and the Golden Talk and the Unborn King created to describe the co-joining of sentience into a collective sentience. But it also could be used to describe the ability to be in communion with another incarnate soul of a higher or lower sentience and share the body type for a bit. So yes, we can be walk-ins, temporary walk-ins in an animal body if we wanted to, provided we had the right level of frequency and evolution to be able to do it quite readily. Right now we're not the right level of frequency to be able to work on the sentience that's available to be able to do that. We need to work on ourselves for about 30 or 40 years and be a dedicated yogi to do that. In terms of the force is simply the source, isn't it? It's working with the source. The source has the ability to be used or abused. The energies of the source has the ability to be used and abused. And there are some aspects of the Illuminati who abuse it. And there are some aspects of it, spiritual individuals who abuse it as well. So it's not every spiritual individual is working for the good of the many. Some of them are working for the good of themselves only, and being very selfish with how they do that. So yes, all of these things are reasonable concepts that can be worked with and can be related to what we're experiencing in reality, so to speak. Okay. Question 7. In the history of God, the source entity says that dolphins arrange a meeting with the committee of man. Just what is this committee? Does it represent all of humanity? How often does this committee meet? Where? How many members? Do representatives rotate in and out of it as a committee, or is membership permanent? Well, the committee of man is basically, every frequency level has a council, if you want to call it that. There's a quite common saying there's a council of 12. Well, there is, but there's many councils of 12. There's a council of 12 for each frequency certainly within the physical universe. And there's one particular council that is or a group of individuals who are working with and manipulating and adapting the environment that we are using in the physical universe to experience, learn and evolve in an accelerated way through interacting with a low frequency environment that challenges us. And so the dolphins being significantly less contaminated by low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions than the incarnate mankind is, have maintained a higher frequency and therefore can communicate with their guides and helpers and these other entities who are governing the environment or the arena, if you want to call it that is the earth, that's allowing us to try to experience individualized free will and work in the right way, and therefore experience accelerated evolution in the process. Okay. How often does it meet? It's always there. It's always in session, so to speak. How many members? There's 12, clearly. This function of 12 is a function of the structure of the origin, and things are generally arranged in groups of 12 because it allows the members or that which is being created to tap into the structure of and the energies associated with the structure of the origin, and then right down to the structure of the source in a more coherent and more powerful way. Do they rotate in and out? The answer is yes, but the other answer is not in our lifetime. Basically, there hasn't been a change in 45,000 years. There hasn't been a change in member in 45,000 years. Those who are part of this council now have felt a responsibility for how things changed with the Atlantean period. So they want to make sure that everything is going back to normal, and they're struggling right now. They're really working very hard. Okay, last question from JM is: in the history of God, Root 7 races are described as incarnating masters who will be fully aware of their true selves and their abilities from birth. Is this happening now? Are people being bored with these aspects? Yes, there are. Some of them are struggling because they don't have any teachers around them to be able to tell them what's going on with themselves, because some of them are confused with what they're experiencing. The transition period of becoming incarnated is quite difficult. But there are those who know who they are straight away, and they are being sort of covertly prepared or hidden or educated. And some of those are the white children. So and these individuals are being, what's the word for it, protected from all the shenanigans that's going on right now in the rest of the world and different frequencies. So I mentioned in previous lectures and World Satsangas that they'll be equispaced around the world, and that there'll be 4 of them that are qualitative teachers, 4 that are quantitative teachers, and 4 that are, so to speak, a bit like Babaji being in the background. And most of them have an idea of who and what they are, but that knowledge grows later. Don't forget, they've still got to work with the environment and work with those individuals within the environment around themselves. So they still have to work with this sort of level of education to understand and gauge how it is to be here, but not be here, so to speak, and how it is to be here but immersed in an incarnation. So they have to understand that as well, because when you're in the higher frequencies, we don't really understand how difficult it is to be here until we're here. And so even those masters who are here struggle a bit. Okay. Right, so that's the last question. Well, thank you, Jane, for those questions. Very good, very, very good. I really appreciate the questions. Very deep thinking, very deeply searching. And now I've got them from OM. So next question, there's about 4 questions here, I believe. First one is quite interesting. Why does suicide so harshly punish? Why are suiciders so harshly punished on the other side? Comments about the Andalx, page 88. I still don't understand the reason of why, even after reading this chapter, since we're all in a state of amnesia, we can't exactly work according to our plans. We constantly shift and change our plans. I'm sure that our guides and helpers are working really hard to do something about the unexpected events, but some of the events won't happen because of our choices. Why do people who commit suicide get so much of the penalty for ruining their life plans? It's not really a case of being punished as such. It's a case of making amends. Basically, it's a case of correcting. So the so-called punishment, if you want to call it that, is in effect recovering the evolutionary progression of those individuals who would have interacted with them within certain environments and certain conditions downstream of their date of suicide, basically. And that also includes those other individuals who they would have interacted with. Not specifically with the suicide, the person who's committed suicide, but there's individuals who would have gained something from that individual, and that would have been passed on to somebody else, that would have been passed on to somebody else, that would have been passed on to somebody else. So it's all these downstream functions and the fractalizations of those downstream functions, where certain things that would have happened, could have happened, should have happened, will have happened, don't happen as a result of this. And the guides and helpers have got all this planned out, of course, haven't they? So although we do things in a state of almost total amnesia, we still have a feeling or a gut feeling or a sense of intuition about doing certain things, and we should do them. And so these things that would have happened downstream don't happen. And what happens is that the individual who commits suicide, because they're in this they must have been stressed or pressurized into doing this, don't understand the downstream functions, and that still and because all these things that happen downstream haven't happened, they have to recover the situation, and most of it is associated with a level of evolutionary progression that all of these individuals, these individually incarnated entities, and those that sometimes aren't incarnate as yet, would have benefited from. So it's about not being punished, it's about recovering the evolutionary progression of themselves and others downstream in a fractalized way of the interaction with them and the subsequent interactions with others later that are not specifically aligned to them, but are as a result of the first interaction with them, and the evolutionary content associated with that needs to be recovered. And so basically the individual who's committed suicide needs to assist and create a condition where they can recover all that downstream evolution. So so when a person commits suicide, they create a condition of evolutionary debt, and it's the evolutionary debt that needs to be recovered, basically, and that's what makes it difficult. So it's not really punishment as such; it's just recollecting evolutionary debt, and this is why in essence, committing suicide is the big sin, so to speak. It's the biggest level of karmic interaction you can have, because it really just causes a downstream issue from an evolutionary perspective. Okay, next question. What is the role of the entities causing nightmares? Are they attracted to traumas of people? What is the point of changing dreams into horror? In essence, nightmares are when we astral travel out of the body, but not very far. So we go up to the next level of frequency, and we start interacting with individuals who are also astral traveling, other astral entities from the lower astral, and individual aspects that are no longer incarnate but can't disassociate themselves from the human condition or the earth. And so they're not really nightmares as such, but they are interactions with others on the fourth frequency level, basically, in an astral traveling condition. Sometimes, very rarely mind you, sometimes a guide or helpers will infuse a level of connectivity with us to make us move away from a certain decision point. So sometimes if other ways in which they're trying to influence don't work, one of the ways that they could make a change of decision that's away from the decision that we shouldn't make to another decision is sometimes given to us by frightening us away. Okay, and sometimes if that's the only way it's going to happen, that's the way they have to do it. They don't like to frighten us, but sometimes if it's the only way to make us change direction, then that's the way to do it. So there's two ways. One is very rare, but sometimes the guide and helpers use some levels of, shall we say, very direct, shall we say, direction to us to make us change direction, which could be classified as being horrible or nightmarish. But more often than not, we experience lower frequency conditions and the environment and low frequency individuals, and it includes astral entities. If we move out of the body just to the fourth frequency level, which is called the lower astral, and we experience that environment there. Okay, which sometimes is nice and sometimes can't be. We sometimes attract astral entities that feed on our fears and present themselves in a way which we are fearful of, so that we don't interact with them in a way that destroys them. If we interact with them in a way which is high frequency, then they can't exist with us, and they tend to dissolve back into source. But if we're fearful of them, they maintain their individuality, and they can use that to feed off us as well. Okay. So I think that answers that question. Next question is, what is the difference between self-realized and enlightenment? It's the same thing. Being self-realized is knowing who and what you are while you incarnate. Enlightenment is the same thing. So being self-realized and being enlightened is the same thing. It's understanding who and what you are whilst you incarnate. And sometimes being self-realized and being enlightened whilst you're in the incarnate state is a very difficult thing to handle, because we then start to realize how limited we are here. Okay, next question, next and final question. It feels that being able to use our abilities is different from being mature, or her level of evolution. This is true. It feels like abilities are just tools we can use. Would you ask the origin what true enlightenment is and how we can best achieve it whilst in the physical? Let me ask the question. True enlightenment is really is understanding what you are, and realizing that the human body and other incarnate vehicles are simply that. They're an incarnate vehicle to be used, and that would allow us to experience the lowest frequencies. True enlightenment is to be able to think, behave, and act in a high frequency way when all around us is low frequency. It's to help others to become higher frequency. It's to be dedicated to helping others become higher frequency, and to see what they really are and who they really are. And it's also, and this is difficult, being able to see that those individuals who are using higher frequency tools, so to speak, are using them inappropriately as well. So really, just because one person is able to access certain functions or certain tool sets associated with being higher frequency doesn't mean they're thinking in a higher frequency way. And actually, you will find that those individuals do start to drop down the frequencies, and they start to lose their ability to interact with higher frequency functions because they start to have lower frequency thoughts, behaviors and actions. So although they start off being able to have high spiritual functionality and abilities, if they're using them inappropriately, they will start to lose them because they're dropping themselves down the frequencies. They're having karmic or low frequency thoughts, behaviors and actions, and that drags their frequencies down and ultimately brings them down to the frequency level where they can't access those higher frequencies easily, and eventually none at all. Okay, so true enlightenment is basically staying pure. It's doing the right thing at the right time. It's helping people when they request it, being of service for people when they request it. It's surrounding yourself in like-minded people, good company. It's working with the environment in a caring and sharing and loving way. It's working with everybody else, understanding who and what they are, and knowing and not taking sides. But even if somebody who is basically somebody you wouldn't want to associate with needs help, you turn the other cheek and you help them. So how we could achieve it in the physical by simply seeing the good in everybody, seeing the good in everything, and where you have the opportunity, just giving the odd nugget of information that will allow them to potentially change the way they think, behave and act, and so that they will be able to progress, so to speak, in a positive way rather than a negative way. Positive being higher frequency, negative being lower frequency. And know when to leave the wet log alone. There's no point in trying to light a fire with wet logs. The thing to do is to make a fire with dry logs. Those are the dry log is a higher frequency and burns faster. Burning is a higher frequency condition. And then when you can, just put the wet log on the fire, because the wet log will be dried out. Or put the wet logs by the side of the fire, so the wet logs dry out and become higher frequency naturally. So it's about balance, really. It's about working properly, being mindful and thoughtful of who and what you are and how you interact with others, and working out how best to interact with them so that you create a high frequency condition within them naturally rather than forcing it upon them. Okay, well, those are very good questions, and thank you very, very much for them. That's JM and OM. And it's interestingly enough, just realised that the initials of this lovely person who's working with me. Actually, OM is the person who's translating my books into Japanese at the moment, and asks lots of questions. And of course, OM is Om, very good, and that's the person's real name, OM. So those are the shall I say the initials to the name. It's brilliant. So very good. I appreciate that. And even the name is in accord with the base resonant frequency of the origin, and therefore the multiverse environment that we're in within the source. Okay, so this brings us to the end of Satsanga meditation, which is basically about how to create and keep a pure mind and pure thoughts. Okay, so find yourself a straight backed chair and put your feet flat on the ground. Get your back straight with the small of your back in the angle of the chair, with the backrest and the seat squab joined together. Close your eyes. Focus your eyes on the location of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. Place the hands palm uppermost on the upper thighs, where the upper thighs meet the lower body. And I want you to just concentrate for a moment, focus on the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen. Okay, it can be scenery, it can be an animal, it can be a flower, it can be a forest, it can be the sea, it can be the headland, it can be birds in the sky, it can be any form of nature. Nature is pure, of course. Put yourself in that position where you're seeing something that brings you complete joy in just seeing it. It could even be a work of art. See how the vision you have specifically if it's like a natural vision of a tree or plants or a forest or a glade or a field or the sea or the headland, mountains for instance. See the purity in it. See how mountains, for example, are largely, mostly unaffected by mankind. See how pure it is. See how the sea, although we are polluting it very badly, but see how it can be unpolluted. See how the coastline of the landmass or a landmass interacts with the sea. See how pure that is. Look at a field of poppies, for instance, or a field of just random grasses and flowers and of all sorts, whether you call them weeds or not, or naturally occurring flowers. All exist together in unison. See the purity in the sun as it moves across the sky from east to west. And the purity of the moon as well, as it moves across our skies, it orbits the earth. Seeing the purity and the joy in the purity of that which is natural. Like fish around a coral reef, birds in trees, flowers in bloom, trees in blossom, butterflies in bushes and buddleia. Insects in and around grasses and swamplands and rivers, fields, trees, are all interacting with each other, all interlinked with each other to create and maintain the physical environment that is the earth on this third frequency level. See how pure it is, how it only becomes impure when mankind starts to mess with it. Move back to the purity of that which is. Find your ideal vision, that vision that gives you stability, belief, knowledge, knowingness of who and what you are and what every other human body and animatable vehicle is on this earth. Is just another way that an aspect that's projected from a true energetic self, sometimes called a Godhead, sometimes called an oversoul, sometimes called a higher self, experiences the lowest frequencies of the multiverse those that are used to create the physical universe, to exist and experience these low frequencies and accelerate the evolutionary progression of that aspect, and therefore the true energetic self itself, and therefore the source, and therefore the origin. See the beauty in all of this. Everything is created to create evolutionary progression. Combine everything I've just said into one particular image. It can be the image of a forest, of a glade, a flower, a tree, a seascape, a landscape, even a spacescape. Feel the joy associated with being in this pure state of beingness in this environment that you recognize as being pure. Every time something happens around you that is karmic, addictive, improper, just see the overall beauty in it by exposing yourself to that image that you've got now, which is your link to purity, your link to higher frequency thoughts. Think no ill of anyone or anything. Only see them as struggling souls working out their life plans. Experiencing, learning and evolving in whichever way they're doing it, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes efficiently, sometimes inefficiently, and sometimes going backwards. See that every human form on this planet and every animated form, animal form, has a smaller aspect of a true energetic self that's animating it, and that interaction with the gross physical through incarnation is allowing that aspect to experience, learn and evolve, and the true energetic self that it's projected from to also progress from an evolutionary perspective. When things go wrong around you or people get frustrated around you, just visualize this image. See the purity in everything. Your perfect image of perfection, of purity of mind, of thought, of body, of sentience. Always look at the bigger picture. Reject the smaller picture. Do not get embroiled in low frequency thoughts, behaviors and actions. Just see a bigger picture and move away from the smaller picture. If you need help, look at your picture of purity. Help it to raise your frequencies, and then stabilize yourself frequentially in a higher frequency. If you want to, you can draw your picture, but make a note of what you've seen somewhere so that you can go back to it. This is a picture of purity of beingness, purity of sentience, purity of interaction with the environment and those other incarnates that are within the environment. Reject thoughts about doing something for just you. Think about the downstream functions of what your actions are going to do for other people. Do things for selfish reasons for other people, not for selfish reasons for yourself. Be selfish about keeping pure. Be selfish about working for Source and working for others by keeping yourself pure. Do not be selfish about material gain or wealth or status or ownership. Even if you have it, just realise it's transient. It's only there for a short space of time. Remember this image, use it as the key to your door to purity of thought, of higher frequency existence, and of detachment from negative thoughts, behaviours and actions. Detachment from karma. So slowly open your eyes, bring yourself back into the environment that you're in, your room or your meditation area, your living room, your bedroom, wherever you are, bathroom. Take a drink of water to help ground you. Write a few notes about which is your image of perfection that you can meditate on to get you back into this perfect state. And think only of good things. Think no ill of anyone or anything. Okay, so that's the end of this Satsanga on the 31st of August 2019. And the next Satsanga is in September, and it'll be on the 28th of September, and I will be basically transmitting this from Greece. I'll be on sabbatical for a week or two and be doing the Satsanga in Greece. So, and hopefully, I might be doing it outside if it's quiet. And you might be able to hear some of the bird song. If not, I'll have to make sure I'm in a nice, quiet, cosy area. Thank you very much for tuning into this World Satsanga in August 2019. Thank you for taking part in the meditation. I can feel the energies of people logging in. And thank you for your questions. And thank you, Kevin, for helping broadcast it and helping promote it. God's love to you all, Source's love to all, and blessings and namaste. Until next time. Did you see the aliens in Crete?